I just want to say I'm so excited to be hearing from our speakers today. This is a topic near and dear to my heart as somebody who's been working remotely for 6 years, as we were just chatting about. So what does it mean to be place-based? The COVID-19 pandemic forced more people to interact with the world through online tools, often at home or in places where Wi-Fi was and is available outside. Being simultaneously isolated and online challenged many people's sense of place, while maybe for the first time, making many people aware that being somewhere in person was not the only way to be present there. Thus, one sense of place as a geographic location and as a cultural setting in which we live and work was challenged. This new or disrupted sense of place extended to educational approaches based on place, whether it was place-based education as nature experiences, environmental education, or community-based learning. Educators began or extended their work developing educational and technological surrogates for being in a place. How might these alternate ways of being in a place, born out of a sudden need stemming from a massive disruption, might forever change how we think about a place? The same is true for how professionals interact with one another. While Zoom fatigue became real for many, others found virtual connections to be more inclusive, just as virtual visits to cultural institutions or remote nature might open up opportunities to those who might otherwise not have visited. So I understand that our speakers have coordinated a bit behind the scenes, so I'm going to turn this over to Catherine Hayden at Loyola to start things off.
Great. Thank you so much. I think our first set of speakers, Nicole and Michael, are you're first, yes?
Can you hear us? We're joining you from Reno, Nevada today, although we live in Oklahoma. We're at the Association for Rural and Small Libraries and enjoying an in-person conference and seeing each other in person. We want to introduce the project real fast and then reflect on the way that the library has conceptualized itself as a virtual space, as well as sort of how we think about the library as an observation spot. But I'll first start off with our project goals. So our ASIL funded project is called the Spotty Rain Campaign, and the goal is to share resources for managing drought risks and encouraging community participation in volunteer drought monitoring. And our research really focuses on the role of libraries in helping people find, use, and share science-based resources about drought. And as you imagine, the whole premise of this project has to do with the fact that libraries are place-based, central to their communities, and able to help translate and bring trust to science-based information. Oh, trying to slip my slide. Oh, there we go. Thank you. I'm real today and just express and introduce you to Michael Hull. He's the director of the Southeast Oklahoma Library System and a strong partner of ours. You know, when COVID hit, he and his team stepped up to do some real significant virtual partnering, and I look forward to sharing that with you. But I couldn't be more thrilled to have him as a partner. Just real quick, environmental damage from drought experiences like wildfires, crop loss, and these in the project is because local monitors can help scientists predict and manage severe droughts. And so for this project, we worked with these two citizen science groups on the right here to sort of figure out what it means to be a drought monitor and how libraries can play a role in that community-based environmental monitoring. Our original plans were to host a webinar series, or we did actually host a webinar series about how to be a drought monitor. And the goal was to inspire librarians to design their own programs and to think about their community assets and partners. After viewing the webinar series, they could apply for grants and host drought-related programs, but guess what? COVID happened and the libraries closed and we didn't know what we were going to do, and nobody's expected it to last this long, but it has. Along the way, we learned some lessons from our formative evaluation and research, you know, that our project was really in the early stages of diffusion, helping librarians understand their role in citizen science before we could get to the more juicy work of turning them into local rain observation spots or hosts. What did we do instead? That's what I want to know. COVID happened and we realized that drought was downplayed by a global pandemic and that libraries were adjusting on the fly as well. So I'd like to invite Michael to talk a little bit about how our collaborations together and how that worked.
Yeah, first off, I'd like to talk to you and share one of our programs that one of my most innovative staff members had been doing for a while. It's a program we call Backyard Explorers. And I don't think you can get much more place-based than what this program was, because it was all about highlighting, and before even I was familiar with the term citizen science, my guy Heath was out there doing citizen science with the participants in these programs. And they were massively attended. And he would bring people in, and he used his with the parks and his training in that to kinds of signs, values, anything else encourages the citizen. It talks about what's all enjoying.
Oh, we're back on.
Seemed as though their audio dropped and they might have gotten kicked from the meeting.
We're back. Can you hear us now?
Yes.
All right.
Well, as Nicole gets the presentation going again on the screen share, just this was a program that we took virtual because it was place-based and everything it was about. But then this got us into the virtual place. I apologize, our internet connection here is just horrible. So then we started partnering with OSU, who helped get us partnered with using the Mozilla hubs to promote this. And I think it's been exciting to me because this local program has now been shared all across the country. So it's on Facebook, you can find it, it's on YouTube, you can find it. And we've been working with our kids and our entire system, not just the library that started, to get them into citizen science and just developing them and understanding the role they can play just while they're there in their virtual world. And the public has really latched onto this. This interactive, we produce, and OSU helps us with some of this material too, but logbooks, challenges, and the topics can cover everything from leaves to weather to bugs. And it's just this great partnership where OSU can help us with resources, with the platform, but yet we're getting our kids open to a new world that they may not have been familiar with before.
All right, they say stop the share. Let's do that. So as Michael was saying, this is a place-based program gone virtual. The library did an amazing job. And I just want to highlight the way in which the library conceptualizes itself as a place to do citizen science. You check out books, you get displays. It really is the start. And each of those videos takes place in a different library, in a different local park. And Heath becomes this kind of like local celebrity. And they even remind you to return library books at the end, which I love. And if I know we're running short on time from glitching in and out, but I think there's this reflections that we've had as a group on what it means to have the library turn from a place, a community centralized place, into a virtual place, and how we continue to support people during COVID. And a lot of learning that we've done about how to turn the library into an observation spot and become a community hub for that. So I can't show you the pictures right now, but the library has installed rain gauges in each of its 15 library branches. And we're moved to see them posted on Facebook. I got 3/4 of an inch and knowing how important that and exciting that is to the community around them. So we're excited about the ways in which we've been able to do that. I don't know if we get an extra minute to finish or reflect. I know my 8 minutes are up. Michael, would you like to say anything else?
Just real quick, as far as equity goes, this is a great program. I mean, libraries are just great for equity anyway, because we're there to serve everyone and to try to bring that balance. And being able to go virtual, be able to connect with people locally all across the country. That's one of the things OSU's helping us with, is to partner with people who may look like our users. And I think that's key for our people who are in very high poverty situation to see, hey, this is a cool program. This person looks like me. This is an opportunity for me. I might be able to do this. So I think this is a program that's changing lives.
Yeah. Thank you for your time, and thank you, Michael. Michael leads a local group, a statewide group of small and rural libraries, and as well as esteemed in his community, and a great advisor and partner. So thank you for joining us today.
Great. I think Kim and I are up next, so let me go ahead and share our presentation here and get us started.
Catherine?
Yes.
Yes. So I will jump in. I am Kim Coyne, she, her, hers pronouns, from Chicago Children's Museum. And we want to talk about our project, Making Space for Story-Based Tinkering. So this project is a collaboration between museum staff and university researchers. And we're looking to design and research informal educational practices that support young children. We're looking at ages 6 to 10 and their caregivers. And we're looking to help those children and caregivers create their own stories while tinkering. So we're leveraging story making and storytelling. We're really seeing that as we're seeing stories as the basis for how people think about the world and their own lives. So leveraging that story making and storytelling to develop programming and facilitation strategies that support engineering learning. Go to the next slide. So a little bit about our own story. Our work was in our tinkering lab at Chicago Children's Museum. That was where all of our work was situated, and then our museum closed. And we really looked at how are we serving our audience? How do we still conduct research? And historically, that programming, that research depended on working on tinkering challenges with facilitators in person. An exhibit that it was equipped with a variety of tools and materials for hands-on activities. So we had power tools in the space, wood, cardboard. We also had facilities to observe and record families tinkering and telling stories, and engage families in reflection about that experience. So what did we do? We started to create tinkering at home video invitations. Truly at home, background is my house, and there is definitely some play space of my family in some of these videos as well. So those video invitations, we wanted them to be timely and relevant. So to encourage that storytelling about what was going on in families' lives at that moment. So for example, our teeny tiny playground story was inviting families to make a playground ride for a toy friend. So it had that engineering challenge, it had that specific challenge, but it was also an opportunity for storytelling with a social and emotional connection. Again, like in our area, Chicagoland, playgrounds were closed, so you couldn't even engage in the outdoor playground activity. Okay. Our next slide. So our prompts were very open-ended. We wanted to make sure families were able to make that story their own. So for another invitation, which was make a party hat, we did offer it in English and Spanish. What the party was, who the hat was, why we needed a hat, that was up to them. And the stories family told, we wanted to really have them able to connect that to their lived experience, their funds of knowledge. So on the slide here, they were really able to connect it to their lived experience of having a trampoline. So we did create this online programs with the motivation to serve our audience where they were at, where they were home. So one thing we weren't able to offer people power tools. They probably didn't have them in their household, but what common whole household items and materials could they use for tinkering experiences? So cardboard, tape, fabric, things like that, but also really being open that like even having tape and scissors might not be common for some communities. Another thing we really looked at is the equal access to tech. How are they going to access these online programs? And we are going to be able to talk about that a little bit more. I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Catherine.
Thank you, Kim. I'm Catherine Hayden, and I'm a professor at Loyola University Chicago, and I have been working with Kim and the rest of our team on this project where we're trying to connect research and practice. And when we are in the museum, unfortunately, we are back at the museum since June. We really have an outstanding technology platform for research. We can observe families semi-unobtrusively, always with their consent, in the Tinkering Lab using cameras that are positioned around the space that allow us to really focus in on the family that we're observing. They wear wireless microphones so we can hear what they're saying. And we have tablet computers that we use to take pictures of what children have made and to record their reflections about their experiences. Well, so COVID happened and all that changed, and we began to develop these online programs that Kim was describing for tinkering at home. And we needed to figure out a way to do like we were doing in the museum, observing families engaging with these programs. So we needed to recruit families who would let us observe them at home. We used a number of recruitment strategies. We reached out to the museum's community partners to advertise the opportunity to families they serve. We posted on social media in parent groups. For our Make a Hat program, we advertised in online Spanish language newspapers. And we reached back to families who had previously participated in the research both at the museum and in other projects that we've done at local libraries. And in all of these efforts, we focused on increasing awareness and providing access to the programs, which admittedly scratches the surface of supporting equity. But we've observed 210 families to date tinkering at home. 41% are Caucasian, 32% are Latino. The families who agree to participate on Zoom. They first watched the video invitation with us, and then we observed them tinkering. As you can see, this is teeny tiny playground with the Zoom screen capture and here to their ramps. And then we follow up with the families a few weeks later and ask them to reflect on their experience. And we have a much better rate of achieving those reflections when we recruit online than we do when we're in the museum. Many families we find understood how to use Zoom and had access to technology such as a laptop or a tablet computer for these observations. But this was for some families because children had been lent that technology by their schools for online learning. And now as we continue to work online with some families and those children have returned back to school, we have found that we need to lend technology to some families as we work with different communities who continue to participate online. We've learned a lot of lessons, but we felt really good about how many families we've been able to involve in the tinkering at home activities. And 56% of the ones that we observe online have never visited the Tinkering Lab. So as I close out here, I just want to say that a key connection between our Tinkering at Home and Tinkering Lab programs is a focus on creating programs for equity. We're continuing to find ways to connect with participants where they are, whether that's their language, their interests, their culture, their experience in making, their comfort with engineering processes. We're designing these programs, as Kim said, open-ended, and to really acknowledge the expertise and the knowledge that families bring to tinkering and storytelling. And our current program at Tinkering Lab, the Cardboard Costume Adventure, builds on strong prior experiences that children have with wearing costumes and becoming characters in their own stories. We really believe that encouraging family storytelling is an important way to connect families and support their meaning making and engineering learning during tinkering. So it's now Harrison and Akoma's turn. So Harrison's getting
Great. Good afternoon or good morning, depending on what part of the country you're in. My name is Harrison Pinckney. I am a faculty member at Clemson University, and my community partner is Akoma Anderson. Very interesting guy, and he'll introduce himself here in a moment. I like to brag about him. He is a pastor of one of our historic African-American churches here in the community, but he also has his PhD from Clemson University in chemistry. So our attempt to do a sales pitch on bringing a STEM program to his church was an easy sale, because he's like, absolutely, I totally understand this world. And so the name of our project is I Am a Scientist, and the primary goal of our project was to get Black teenagers, especially middle school age, to see themselves as scientists, to understand the value of science and how it could serve a instrumental purpose and role in their lives. And so we kept our slides somewhat minimal. I put this up here because what is very interesting, I think, about our project that's a little bit unique compared to, I think, some of the other panelists, is that the way in which we looked at sort of place-based, it was already central to the development of our proposal. But what is also interesting is, and Akoma and I will talk about this a little bit more in a moment, is that our place in which our project is situated became far more vital as a result of the COVID pandemic. And so the short end is, when we think about access to STEM programs, when we think about access to community resources, what we often find is, once we get into racially marginalized communities, that some of these resources and some of these agencies begin to disappear, right? And so quality after school programs, YMCAs, safe parks, zoos, libraries, museums, a lot of these things are not readily available in many African American or Latino communities. And so what we proposed from the very beginning was that we would leverage the agencies and resources that are available, that has historically served these communities for the past 200 years or more. And so as an example, certain communities, you may not find a solid after school program or a safe park for kids to go to, but you will find a candy lady. And so I don't know how many of you are familiar with the concept of the candy lady, but that is the woman on the block who actually, kids go to her house after school and she'll sell, 50-cent candy, or she might have hot dogs available. That's a safe space that kids go and hang out a lot of times in African American communities. The barber shop, Mr. Brown's backyard, because he has a trampoline and he just has it up for the kids to come in and play. Local nonprofit, independent agencies. And so we looked at these types of institutions and began to question what would happen if we were to leverage these institutions to be the providers of informal STEM learning. And so the institution that we're going to highlight today, of course, with Pastor Anderson being here, is the role of the Black church. And so I'll turn it over to him, let him talk a little bit about the significance of the Black church in our communities, and what role that, or how that might have contributed to the success of this project so far.
First of all, let me say good afternoon or good morning as well to those of you, again, depending on what part of the country you're in. And I want to thank you all for this opportunity to be able to share with you today. And again, my name is Ankoma Anderson. I'm senior pastor at Welfare Baptist Church, which is located in Anderson, South Carolina, in a small town inside of Anderson that's known as Belton. But what I want to share with you today, more specifically, is about the significance of the African American church. I think it is vital, as Harrison mentioned, leveraging the opportunities with community partners. I think it's vital and a great opportunity for such a project to move forward within the African American church. Because as we begin to think about the historic role of the African American church for decades at this point, the African American church has been the nucleus of the community. And I always like to say that the African American church in so many ways has been the central nervous system of the African American community. For example, within the African American church, particularly if it is a church that's made up of families, immediate family, as well as extended families, that structure that is there, you have aunties and uncles and cousins, even friends or neighbors who eventually take on this role as being surrogate parents to students who may be members of that church, but not only do they have to necessarily be a member of the church, but even if they are a member of the community. And so educationally, the African American church for so long has housed after school programs. And as I think about myself at Welfare Baptist Church, particularly being a Black Baptist church in South Carolina, as a part of our extended network, a part of our mission is to educate. And so again, this program is right in line with our mission to educate and to empower young minds. And also, as Harrison mentioned, the African American church has always been somewhat of a safe haven for adults as well as young people from the ills that may be present in the street life, drugs, gangs, violence, and that sort of thing. And so with the reasons that I've mentioned thus far, I really believe, I'm thoroughly convinced that the church is a place for racial socialization to take place, particularly again, as we think about the African American church, because the African American church has always had a privatistic, meaning spiritual, as well as a social or communal responsibility. And I'll even go as far to use some theological terms here. It allows the church to act in a very priestly manner, which means that the church is meeting the needs of those who are in the congregation, as well as its community constituents. But just as much as the church acts in a priestly manner, it also acts in a prophetic manner. And what I mean by that is that the church has an opportunity to speak on behalf of the marginalized, but in that prophetic role as well, it has an opportunity to give the marginalized a voice. And so to me, this is the very essence of racial socialization. So when I think about the church where I serve, which is Welfare Baptist Church, I believe that we offer a very unique perspective on this. Again, me being a trained theologian, but also a professional scientist. As a theologian, I'm able to act in my priestly role, meeting the needs of my congregants, those in my community. But equally, in my prophetic role, I'm able to give voice by way of creative inquiry and also informal learning experiences, or providing informal learning experiences to young and impressionable minds who could potentially fall in love with science. And so I think that's interesting to me.
And Kevin, are we over time? I haven't gotten a note yet to tell me. Okay, so we're over time. We'll stop there.
Layla, are you?
Yep, I'm here. Is that everybody then? All right. Well, this was just fascinating to listen to. I think I have about 5 minutes to try to summarize so many things. So I'll see what I can do. So for the first project that Nicole and Michael spoke about, the Spotty Rain project, I was interested in the ways in which virtual communications can perhaps support ways of scaling up successful projects. They spoke a bit about the Backyard Explorers project and how it existed in localized places and it's been moving out to other library branches. And that just strikes me as one of those things that maybe is an unanticipated benefit of virtual communications, that you can reach a wider audience than you might have thought that you were able to. Another thing that struck me about their project, is the discussion about how libraries have historically been pretty good places for promoting equity. Historically speaking, we built branches of libraries in communities because that's where the people were. And so it was one of the few kinds of public institutions that could reach a broad range of communities. And, I just think that's interesting, if we're shifting to more virtual models, what does that mean? What is gained and what is lost? I know here in Seattle, for example, there's a lot of talk towards more pop-up libraries, getting rid of the physical edifices, the grand buildings that used to exist for libraries, and moving where the people move as sort of a migrant library community almost. And I wonder what aspects of that are gains, what aspects of that are losses, and how virtual communication technologies can connect people across these sorts of places and communities. With respect to Kim and Catherine's project, I was struck by Kim discussing how she was doing a lot of these activities at her own home. She was coaching people through these activities at her own home, and that was just such an interesting leveling of place. You're in your own home, you're speaking to families in their own home, and that just is a really interesting and new form of connection that we don't get when we're working at our institutions with families. It levels things in a really interesting way, and I don't know what more to say about that other than that's very different. And I would imagine that the person-to-person relations are a bit different. Maybe it challenges some of the concepts of authority that people come into, with expectations that museum folks have the authority and they don't. Maybe it promotes agency. I don't know. Those are some of the questions that prompted for me. And then when Catherine was speaking about the research challenges, moving from a space, and let me tell you, I'm familiar, Catherine, with the challenge of having your museum close and losing your research facility. But, looking at some of the images you were sharing, seeing how the parents were, must have been co-opted to some extent to, move the camera to good positions to capture what was going on, to capture the scene of the action and whatnot, we're engaging more in the reflection. Just curious, what might have been gained by that? In a sense, you're asking parents to act as research assistants. So, are they becoming more aware of what research is about and what good it might be doing for them and for the community at large? And conversely, what that might be teaching you guys as researchers, are you learning things about data collection that you might not have thought of, techniques for capturing things or documenting things that, would have been different than how you would have gone about it as a researcher, but nonetheless provide really valuable data. And then Harrison and Ankoma, that was really fantastic. As somebody who is not familiar with African-American communities, it just was really transformative to hear you describe just the real wealth of diverse possible places and people that informal learning can be supported by in communities. And it struck me that for those of us who aren't lucky enough to have that familiarity with the African American community, there's a lot of learning to be done. And it doesn't just have to be African American community, it could be any communities that are not part of the paradigm typically represented in research places. And I wonder, if there's any role for virtual technologies to assist with a discovery process there, helping people become more familiar with what the lived experience is for people in different communities. Where are these spaces? What are they like? What do they feel like? What are the people like? What's the rhythm of activity in these spaces? Are there ways that we can connect people virtually across these locations, where you might not have found yourself walking before, but now you feel like you understand a bit better what the lived experience of people in those spaces is? And, can that be of use to helping bridge? I know in EASL, we've been talking about this a lot, where we have proposals come in with very well-meaning people who don't really know their communities terribly well, the ones that they're trying to partner with. And, could techniques, virtual techniques be used to help discover, what the safe spaces are, what the resources could be leveraged in these different communities might be. And I'd like you to, carry some of these ideas, carry some of your own ideas. How are you struggling with this topic of place-based engagement in your own work? Are there ways in which your work suggests solutions or ways forward or new ways of thinking about these issues? And, of course, what are the implications of our work for the goal of advancing equity in partnership with communities? So thank you all speakers for bringing this, really outstanding array of projects for us to consider and to spark our discussions moving forward.